This tutorial is going to look at the NILS application process. As you probably already know, your project must be approved by the NILS Research Approvals Group in order to gain access to the data. The Research Support Unit are here to guide and help you through this process, so please don't hesitate to contact us should you have any further questions after watching this video. I just want to point out a few features of this video. If you click on the eye on the bottom right corner, you can navigate between video chapters. You can see a list of all the links I use in this presentation and that I refer to in the video, and you can also get my contact details in case you have any queries. We will look at existing web resources and how to get started, how to know if the NILS is the best data source to answer your research question, an overview of the steps and timeframes involved in the application process, and how to overcome the most common reasons for unsuccessful applications. As you will notice, we have undertaken considerable work on the website and are constantly adding more resources which hopefully you will find useful. I will take this opportunity to point out a few of the online sections which will help you to get started. So in the Starting a Project section, there's a few different choices depending on whether you're non-academic, academic, or student. In the Data and Documentation section, there's a number of drop-down menus which relate to each aspect of the application process. There's also one for the RAG, dates and deadlines for the upcoming year. And the Research section has all of our previous projects categorized by theme. Also, if you are looking for something specific, you can always type a keyword into the search box. The NILS is a wide-ranging database of people and their major life events spanning decades. It contains rich, layered information which cannot be found elsewhere and can be used to look at a number of social issues. In order to use the NILS, your project must meet our 4 key criteria. Number 1, it must be longitudinal. So in other words, do you require repeated measures over time? Are you going to examine associations over a number of years, for example? Secondly, you must clearly illustrate how the NILS will uniquely contribute to your study. So think about why your study specifically needs the NILS. Can your study do without the NILS, and why? Number 3, provide clear evidence of the value of your study in terms of health and social care. So here we use the WHO definition of health as a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being. And lastly, your project must support the development or delivery of public policy. So next, it's also important to consider whether sufficient data is available to answer your research question. You can explore the variables that we have within the Data and Documentation section. So there is an option to download the full data dictionary, or you can read an overview of each data theme or data set, which is listed down the left-hand side. So this next diagram shows an overview of the whole application process, but I am going to break this down into steps. The first column shows the stages from initial contact to completion of your form. It's best to make initial contact as soon as possible with some details of your project, ideally in a one-page summary. The Research Support Unit can then advise you of the feasibility and pencil you in for a slot at the RAG. So this is generally recommended about 2 to 3 months before the RAG that you're aiming for. This then gives you a workable deadline, and the RAG has been filling up quickly over the past year, so it is always good to get in ahead. While you work on your form, you can also be working towards obtaining approved researcher status. These applications are now online, as is the Safe Researcher training during lockdown. All researchers named on the application will need this status to see intermediate outputs, and all researchers entering the SAFE setting will also need their Access NI certificate. So it's a good idea to get ahead and apply for that while you're waiting for your application to be approved. Your application form will then go to the RAG, who meet every 2 months. Dates are on the website as I showed, but it is best to check availability with the RSU team and get penciled in. So please also note that the deadline for submissions is 2 weeks before the actual RAG date, but again, both these are listed on the website. And this just allows time for the RSU to check the application, to talk about any potential issues with the data providers, and to send to RAG members to read over before the meeting. And the next 2 steps here will be carried out by the RSU to prepare your data in the safe room. The timing of this part varies depending on the complexity of the project, whether RAG have recommended any changes to variables, and also the current resources in these times of restrictions. When the data is ready, access is fairly quick as long as all paperwork is in order. The final thing then to look at today is the completion of a good NILS application. We have reviewed and compiled a list of the most common reasons by the RAG why applications are not approved, and I'm going to use some example forms and projects to help see how these issues can be overcome. So the first is health criteria, and things like health criteria is lacking or not met altogether are some of the most commonly cited reasons under this topic. This is one of the 4 key criteria, and it has a designated section on the form, so it is very important. It can be a good idea to look at previous abstracts on the website to see how they have strengthened or emphasised a health connection, especially if your idea does not have an immediately obvious link to health. So I'm going to use a project on the exploration of the Irish language as an example. So this is one that's maybe not immediately obviously linked to health, but you can see that we've used this section on the form to emphasise the connection via the hypothesis that a second language is beneficial for brain health and well-being. We've also stated that this will act as a pilot study and may be further developed to link to prescription medications, allowing the exploration of cognitive health outcomes. And this also shows that we do recognise the limitations of our variables. Issues relating to data then that have come up, the sample size may be too small, variable justification lacking, these kind of things do seem to come up as well. To illustrate the calculation and estimation of sample size, I'm just going to use another of my projects, which is on social isolation and health effects. In the top box, I've put the aims and objectives of this project. So you can see I'm going to look at the prevalence of social isolation and how it differs according to certain groups, such as age, sex, rural, urban living, and the association with health and early mortality. So the first thing the form will ask to specify is what sample population is needed. In this instance, it is all NILS members in both 2001 and 2011 census, and that is my core sample that I will work with. In the next box, it asks for an estimated sample size, and this is of course something that the RSU can help with, but you will also get a lot of information from the NILS metadata and from census tables, which I've put in the links box on the video. So for example, the NILS metadata tells me how many people are enumerated in both census, and it also gives the urban-rural split, so I can actually calculate how many roughly live rurally. To then get the age breakdown, I use the NI level census data, and I've just again taken the proportions to estimate the number within the NILS sample. And lastly, I have here a snippet from my variable list. So you need to put the table name, the variable name, and the justification for their inclusion. And you can get this information from the data dictionary. So there'll be a few ID variables for linkage purposes, and you can just put that in the justification box that it is for linkage. There'll also be some variables which I'm sure will be immediately obvious why you require them. For example, I've asked for the month and the year of death, and as mortality is one of my outcomes, I have just written that it is to assess the outcome of mortality. But when there are variables that are maybe not immediately obvious or require a little bit more of a tenuous link, it's a good idea to put a little bit more information about them and even a reference where possible. Finally then, some general comments. Things like the time frame being too tight, or they want to see that you plan to achieve impact beyond academia as well. They want to see a really well-structured and clear proposal that will add something new to the field. And they also want to see that the methods have been thought through and that you realise any limitations the data might have. So here is a section from another of my applications looking at the social and economic determinants of maternal obesity. And this is actually a data linkage project. So I've put in the aims and objectives, also the methods. So not only what I want to look at, but how I will do this. And just to note, the RAG will not actually be judging whether or not I should use, for example, logistic regression, as I've put here. But they will see that I've considered the methods and given myself a clear plan, which will also save me time when I get into the safe setting. I've also added in a section on methodological considerations and study limitations. And here, for example, I've acknowledged that I can't account for diet and physical activity. Obviously, these are important when considering obesity, but we just don't have those variables. To summarise then, do use the web resources to check your idea fits the key criteria and to see what kind of data is available and whether the NILS is feasible for your study. Do make initial contact with the RSU to scope out your idea and come up with a realistic deadline. And do ensure that your application form is well structured and there is a clear plan of what you want to do and how you can do it. And good luck with your application.